Great. Good morning. Good afternoon, rather. This morning, the Secretary General spoke at the high-level meeting on peace building and sustaining peace. He said, in a world where many countries are experiencing violent conflict, quote, we need greater unity and courage to ease the fears of people we serve, to set the world on track to a better future, and to lay the foundations of a sustainable peace and development. Above all, he said, sustainable inclusive development is the world's best preventive tool against violence, conflict, and instability. He called on member states to continue to implement the 2030 agenda. He also stressed that sustaining peace will only be realized through national ownership that considers the need of the most marginalized, including women, young people, minorities, and people with disabilities. The Secretary General welcomed the new report presented yesterday by his Special Envoy on Youth, saying that it is beyond time to recognize the major contribution of young people can make to peace and security. I hope you will support my reforms in this area, aiming at putting young people in charge and taking full advantage of their knowledge, ideas, and initiatives. In Brussels, the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, spoke at the conference on Syria. He warned the participants that as the number of people in urgent need of assistance continue to grow, the United Nations has exhausted its resources to respond. Within the resources of the UN can possibly expect to mobilize this year, he said, we cannot meet even all the urgent needs. Our focus is now to ensure that the 5.6 million people who are assessed as being in acute need inside Syria are made the priority. The United Nations and its partners are looking for $3.5 billion to provide life-saving assistance and prosecution for 13.1 million people inside Syria. So far, the humanitarian response plan for 2018 is only 23% funded. The Security Council is holding close consultations today to hear briefings on Sudan, South Sudan, and the UN peacekeeping force in Abyei. Council members are hearing updates from the Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, as well as the Secretary General Special Envoy, Nicholas Fink-Haysom. Turning to Somalia, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that unusual early seasonal rains across the country have resulted in flash flooding in some areas in the south and central part of the country, causing displacement and worsening conditions in overcrowded settlements for internally displaced people. The flash floods have affected approximately 60,000 people so far, but if the water continues to rise, up to 500,000 people could be impacted. Humanitarian partners, in collaboration with the government, are stepping up efforts to mitigate the impact of flooding. Medical supplies have been pre-positioned to address potential disease outbreaks, and stocks of hygiene and sanitation supplies are ready for deployment in Banadir and Somaliland. And insecurity and population displacement have left nearly 1 million people severely food insecure in the Democratic Republic of the Congo's Tanganyika province. That includes more than 350,000 people who are in the emergency phase of food insecurity. Meanwhile, some 667 public primary schools have been destroyed, or 30% of the 1,633 schools in the province, depriving over 66,000 children of access to education. Humanitarian workers are mobilized to provide immediate assistance to those in need in Tanganyika and in neighboring O.E.C.D and O.Lomani provinces, reaching more than 500,000 people with life-saving assistance since October of last year. However, humanitarian access has at times been hindered by insecurity and administrative impediments. And our friends at UNHCR and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, O.E.C.D, today launched an action plan to expand employment opportunities for refugees so they can integrate in their host communities from the very start and contribute to the local economy. The plan identifies areas that are key to ensure successful labor market integration of refugees, such as matching of refugee skills with employers' needs, and the need for legal certainty on the length of stay of refugee workers, and helping employers navigate the administrative procedures dealing with refugee employment. A couple of things I want to flag. In a statement we issued yesterday afternoon on Yemen, the Secretary General strongly condemned the airstrikes on a wedding party in Hajjah and on civilian vehicles in Taiz, where at least 50 civilians, including children, were reportedly killed and scores of others injured. And also on Armenia, we issued a statement last night in which the Secretary General noted the resignation of Prime Minister Sargsyan. He welcomed the peaceful nature of the unfolding events and encourages all relevant actors to continue to exercise restraint and prioritize dialogue. At this important time for Armenia, the Secretary General calls on the continued respect for the rule of law and human rights, as well as the maintenance of peace and stability in Armenia and the wider region. And last night, we also issued a third statement on Nicaragua, in which the Secretary General said he is concerned about the casualties in recent protests in Nicaragua and called for restraint on all sides. He called on the government of Nicaragua to ensure the protection of human rights of all citizens, particularly the right to peaceful assembly and freedom of expression. And lastly, I wanted to flag, we've seen a couple of reports, notably on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's reporting, quoting unnamed UN official regarding Canada's contribution to the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali. As you know, in March, Canada announced plans to deploy 2 Chinook transport helicopters and 4 Griffin attack helicopters to the UN mission in Mali. In August, the UN is grateful for Canada's contribution, which will play a valuable role in the continued effort to bring peace and stability to Mali. Discussions are ongoing with Canada with regard to the timeline and modalities of the deployment. And in connection with the GA high-level meeting on peace building and sustainable peace, where I expect the President of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, to brief you at about 12:30 or very soon at the GA stakeout, and that will be followed by the President of the General Assembly, Miroslav Lajčák, who's expected at 1 p.m. And today, Sri Lanka has paid its dues in full, bringing us up to 85. And now I'm happy to take some questions. Sometimes I ask, sometimes I reserve to ask the first question myself. Yes, Matthew.
Sure. I'm sorry, I wanted to ask you about what I'd asked you about yesterday, which was was listed on the UN's website as child rape in South Sudan. And I've seen a press release by UNMISS put out early this morning. Well, I don't know. Again, there's a time difference, I'm sure, but early morning here, saying as follows, that it is alleged that one of the teenage girls had been touched inappropriately by a member of the Nepalese contingent in exchange for money. There was no allegation made of rape. First, I wanted to make sure, is this the same incident that
Yes, so let me bring some clarity.
And is it not rape if it's an underage person?
Let me bring some clarity to this. Upon receipt of the allegation, the mission in South Sudan immediately dispatched its sexual exploitation abuse immediate response team to preserve evidence ahead of the national investigation that we expect from the Nepalese. We are informed that the Nepalese government has appointed a national investigative team within the time frame requested by the Secretariat. So the dispatch is done in advance of the dispatch of the Nepalese team. The allegations were initially reported on the UN website for conduct in UN field missions as including an allegation of rape, as this had been the interpretation made based on the information available at the time of posting. The nature of the sexual activity has now been clarified, and therefore the matter is being recategorized as sexual assault and attempted sexual assault, pending further information that may arise through the investigation. I mean, as you know, any information on or allegation of sexual exploitation abuse are reported as quickly as possible as part of the Secretary General's transparency initiatives. In the case of peace operation, it's done on the website of the conduct in UN field missions, and information on new allegations is posted on the basis of information that is available at the time. And obviously, as these are ongoing investigation, there may be updates to what's posted on the website.
Sure. I guess I just wanted to understand. There in many places in the United States, for example, the payment of money for inappropriate touching of an underage person would be characterized that way. What does the UN call that?
The information that we have now is that this involves sexual assault and attempted sexual assault.
So, not to be too graphic, is it? It's not penetration, it's not rape?
It's the information that we have at this time. Masood.
Thank you, Stéphane. On this, on the statement that the Secretary General has issued on Yemen, and has the United Nations been in touch with the Saudi coalition? And also, has there been any assessment of the children being killed over there? How many children were killed, especially in that bridal party? Do you have any such figures available
our concern
right now?
Our concern about the death of civilians, the attack on civilian infrastructure, has been made clear, and repeatedly so, to all the parties involved, including the coalition. We have reminded time and time again the parties of their obligations under international humanitarian law concerning the protection of civilians. We are not on the ground in this particular place. We are going on what the information has been reported to us by our partners.
After the Saudis got the big arms approval from the Trump administration, it seems that they've increased the attacks inside Yemen in particular. I don't know.
I leave it to you to do the analysis. I'm reporting on our opinion and on the facts as we have them. Abdelhamid.
Thank you. Stéphane, regarding this conference in Geneva for fundraising for Syria,
it's in Brussels.
In Brussels, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Are the Palestinian refugees in the Yarmouk refugee camps are included? Will be any money assigned to the Yarmouk refugee camp through UNRWA?
It would be, and that disbursement is done through UNRWA. But we're talking about all human beings who are living in Syria.
And do you have any update on the situation in Yarmouk refugee camp?
No, I do not. We'll ask our UNRWA colleagues.
And my second question. You are familiar with this human rights report issued by the State Department of the U.S.? They dropped the word occupied territories. The word occupied is not mentioned in this report. They talk about
that, yes. What is the question?
Any view of the Secretary General on this change of policy?
We have a nomenclature that we use. We have words that we use, and we will continue to use those. Mr. Abadi.
But did you make them known to the U.S.?
I think the U.S. is very well aware of the situation. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stéphane. Both the Secretary General as well as the President of the General Assembly seem to have found a new word to describe peace, namely sustainable peace. Besides being more condensed, what is the advantage of using that as compared to what we have in the Charter already, maintenance and preservation of international peace and security?
I think the word the expression sustainable peace, I think, underscore the point that the Secretary General is making, which is obviously peace is the lack of the absence of conflict and the absence of war, but to secure that peace and the efforts to secure that peace are directly tied to our efforts towards sustainable development. Yes, sir, in the back. No, 1 second. Yeah, go ahead. You have to press the button. Le bouton. No.
Concerning Sahara.
I think that's a question for council members. The Secretary General has handed in his report, and obviously council members are discussing it, continue discussing. Mr. Lee, and then we'll go. Your microphone as well. There we go.
Okay. The follow-up on that question then, regarding the definition of sustainable peace, then what would be the raw model of sustainable peace?
What would be the what?
Raw model. Any country, I know myself, but I would like to see your view or Secretary General view on that.
I don't know if I'm going to identify a role model for sustainable peace. We would like to see sustainable peace the world over. What is your other question? Is that it? Excellent. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I have some more on South Sudan, but I wanted to ask you just to follow up on Western Sahara. You'd said that there's a draft, Intercity Press published it, and the draft, which I know you're not going to respond to, but there's a reason I'm asking you this. One of the paragraphs in the draft, 2ter, quote, expresses concern regarding Polisario Front's announcement of the planned relocation of administrative functions to Bir Lahu. And I wanted to ask you whether it's given that MINURSO is there, are you aware? Has there been an announced planned relocation? Or, what's your position on that? I'm not asking you about the draft. I'm asking about the facts.
Whatever parties decides to change, relocate whatever they would want to relocate is up to them to announce.
Right, but don't they? So you're not aware of them telling?
I'm not. I'm saying it's up to them to announce. What is your other question?
Okay, I wanted to. Actually, you were saying that in South Sudan that in the interest, there's transparency and the speed of listing things. So I wanted to ask you whether the National Media Authority has said that national reporters, not international reporters, national reporters are banned from going into from covering the POC sites, which is apparently where the incident that I was asking about. But it goes beyond that. They said that only international reporters are allowed in, and they characterize that as only for fundraising purposes. Is there a distinction made by UNMISS between the two?
No, for us, reporters are reporters. I think the mission has expressed its concern about new rules that are being imposed on journalists and how they report in South Sudan. Freedom of expression is the cornerstone of any democracy. As South Sudan heads into a critical time in the peace process, it's important now more than ever that the voices of all people, so that a genuine, inclusive, and durable peace can be achieved, if not sustained. UNMISS is encouraging the government to create an environment that will enable media to freely report on the political, humanitarian, and security situation in the country.
But we may be kind of talking about two different things. I'm talking about the government there criticizing UNMISS for restricting journalists, saying that national reporters.
Then I'm not aware of those restrictions, but if they exist, I will check. Yes, let's let Mesdames speak. Olga and then Evelyn. I'll come back to you.
Thanks, Steph. Security Council meeting tomorrow on Syria. I just want to ask you, what do you expect after Special Envoy de Mistura joins Security Council in Sweden? What do you expect Council to discuss tomorrow, and if Special Envoy de Mistura would be here in New York?
Let me check what's exactly on the agenda, and I'll get right back to you. Yes, Evelyn.
Right. In Tanganyika province that you mentioned before,
yeah.
Why are schools destroyed? Who's destroying them, and for what reason? I hadn't heard that before, that the schools were... And secondly, the usual question is, have you any updates on the OPCW in Duma?
Well, the destruction of the schools is due to a number of factors, including the increase in insecurity in the region. On Duma, you'd have to ask OPCW. Masood.
Yes, Stéphane. On this issue of, has the Secretary General has any conversation with the Indian government? Because today there were again clashes in Held Kashmir in which 5 people were killed. Has the Secretary General had any talk with the Indian government?
I'm not aware of any, Masood. Yes, sir. Your microphone again, please. Sorry, so I can hear you.
Commission to be.
Is there a what?
A control commission to be sent to buffer zone.
The mission conducts its patrols of unarmed observers as it is mandated to all the areas they're able to access. Mr. Lee.
Just one. Yesterday, I think I saw it just after the noon briefing, but that there had been a statement on Armenia. I just want to understand sort of how it came out. So then I went to your office and asked. They said there wasn't yet a statement.
No, there was
then
no
statement. There was
an
answer given.
There was no statement at the time you asked. There was a question that was asked by one of your colleagues. It was not a statement. We gave him an answer, and then later in the day, an official statement was released, and we shared that with everybody.
Did you give the answer? Was it in a typed-up paper form? Because it was tweeted as a photograph of what looked just like a statement.
It was given when a journalist asks us a question outside of the briefing room. We share it with that journalist, right?
When you choose to answer.
When we're able to answer.
Okay.
If there is a statement, we will share it broadly. If there is If someone raises a question in this briefing and then we answer later, we share it. We share it with everybody.
Then how do you decide? Sometimes you come in here and you say, in response to questions from your colleagues, I have the following to say.
It's the beauty of the authority that's invested in me.
I want to ask you one last thing as the authority on all things Antonio Guterres, if I can.
You may.
Okay, as you may have seen, there is a sexual harassment Me Too issue at UNHCR, and it goes back into the past in such a way that it actually intersects with Antonio Guterres' time there. It has to do with Craig Sanders, current deputy director of UNHCR, and it has to do with allegations now widely reported in the UK and in at least 2 publications that he told a colleague not to report when he was serving in Darfur for UNHCR sexual abuse allegations because he didn't want there to be a food for sex scandal on his watch. That's the quote. And so this reverberated around apparently within UNHCR for some time after that while Antonio Guterres was the head of UNHCR. So you may not know.
I'm not aware
what
of
was
the
his
case.
awareness
I think
of that?
I'm not aware of the case. I think